Welcome. Today we are pulling back the curtain and taking an inside look into Backstage Realty's property management program. I'm your host, Dawn Johnson, and I have Charlotte Doe, realtor, property manager extraordinaire with me today. Welcome, Charlotte. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Dawn. I am originally from Atlanta, Georgia. Practiced real estate there for 4 years, mainly in property management. Moved to Navarre in 2018, and I've been with Backstage for the last 3 years. And time's flying.
So, to tell you a little bit about myself, I grew up in Southern California. My dad says I'm a true Southern girl. I was born in Southern Spain, raised in Southern California, and now I effectively live in Southern Alabama. Panhandle of Florida. I love it. Um, I started in real estate. Well, I've been in some form of real estate most of my life. However, I got my license in 2005. In the first 6 months, I was one of the top salespeople across the Emerald Coast from Pensacola to Panama City. I was in the top 3%. This was during the huge real estate boom where all you had to do was have a willingness and a pulse and a good pen, and you could write offers. So I did really well, and I decided that I wanted some investment properties, and I wanted to learn about property management and asset management. And everyone thought I was wasting my time learning from the gentleman who managed about 30 properties at the brokerage that I was at. And I learned all about it. I wrote a business plan for it, and I built the first successful company. We got to about 1,200 units by the time I left, and started my own company in 2014, Backstage Realty,
Mhm.
and have been in business for 10 years this August.
Nice.
So let's discuss what brought us to this recording today. Charlotte, tell everybody what prompted this. Where did this idea of doing? We've never done a video before. What prompted us to go ahead and give it a shot and do a video?
So yeah, this was prompted actually by a prospect looking for a property management company. He actually is an investor. He has 2 properties in Gulf Breeze. He is with another property management group. It's been on the market a couple of months, and he's a bit frustrated. So he sent me a 3-page questionnaire. It had some great questions, and so we decided it was an opportunity to do in an in-depth response, and maybe help others that have frustration, questions. And we love talking about our program, and we love very informed investors.
Isn't it the best when you have the trust and you have an educated investor that understands what it is that you do, what is behind what you do? It's a really great relationship at that point.
Yes.
And so let's get down to the material. There were so many good questions. It was a 3-page questionnaire. There were great questions. We'll try to answer as many of those as possible. We'll go deeper into some kind of, organically as this comes along. Others we might just kind of skim. We will most certainly go back to the client and answer all of his questions in detail. However, we also wanted to add some information so that people can understand the theories behind how we manage our properties, what guides us, how we create our policies and procedures, and get a clear picture on our investment theory, and how we make those decisions.
So the first section relates to general information. How long has your company been in business in the area, and does your company manage properties similar in size, class, etc. to mine?
Absolutely. And that's a very good question. And I think it's very important for an investor to know what type of properties a company manages. So we have been in business since 2014. When we opened the doors, we were a property management company. We also do real estate sales as well. But we had a portfolio of properties that we brought with us. And over time, when I had built the company to 1,200 units, we took everything that walked in the door. And this company, we have been much more selective in how we choose our properties and how we choose to spend our time. That's both with our owners, our tenants, and the property. So you've got the asset side and you've got the people side. So we manage about 125 properties right now. We are in a steady growth phase, but I would much prefer growing slow and picking the right people and the right properties than growing fast and not being able to give good clients the proper attention and detail that they need in their property management. They've also asked for a few properties that we currently manage and some references of current and past clients. Charlotte, would you be able to get them some information on that? And what other properties do you have? Charlotte manages our Navarre Gulf Breeze market. What other properties do you have out that way that you feel would be comparable to this client's property?
Yes, so I actually got the opportunity to go take a look at the properties today. And I have a property, very similar in Fort Walton right now that's on the market. It's doing very well. We have applications. And so yeah, I'm confident to give him some feedback and some pricing. And confident to get him some references over to him.
Wonderful. And we don't, I missed that on here. Pricing is very important. So while we're on that subject, and since you mentioned pricing, where do we come up with the pricing? Who sets the pricing? How do we control pricing? And where do we get our numbers from?
So multiple places. We look at our listings, look at comps. We look at what's active on the market, but that doesn't control, because it can be active at a price that's wrong. It can be too high. So we like to look at what's been rented in the past couple of months, comparable. And the market, the people set the price. If it's, if you're $100 off and they are 200 and they can get a better, a 4-bedroom versus a 3-bedroom for the same price, they're going for the bigger property. So we take a lot of those into consideration.
So we're not setting our prices based on, say, government housing prices, our military subsidies, things like that, because
Yeah,
they get to pocket anything they don't use, right?
absolutely.
So we want to make sure that we're competitive in the market. We want to make sure we're giving a premium property, and we don't have to be the cheapest in the market, right?
Right. Well, we
But
don't
we
want to be the cheapest, but we want good clientele in our properties. But we have to price it correctly based on market. Absolutely.
So I hear a lot of owners say things to me like, I don't want to price it too low because I don't want to get the wrong class of people in there. Um, and I know that to me, it's sometimes difficult explaining to them that pricing it too high actually gets the wrong type of people in
Mm,
there,
yeah.
because the only people that are going to pay too much for a property are going to be people that don't typically make good financial decisions,
Yes.
in general.
And we've
So
seen that a lot.
me being a business owner and having a good credit score and money in the bank, I'm not going to overpay for something. I'm going to look at it, snub my nose, and move on to the next property. So, do you find that to be the case?
Yes, yeah, we've seen that across the board constantly. Um, and yeah, absolutely. Anybody with a good mindset and finances and great, good credit, they're not going to pay too much. They're going to search, they're going to look, they're going to do their due diligence and get the best price for a property.
Yeah.
If
And
we're
those are
over,
going to be the people we want. They're thinking
absolutely.
ahead, they've done their research, they've run
Yes.
their numbers.
Yes.
We don't want the ones that they need to be out by tomorrow, and
Yes.
and
They're
they'll pay
running.
whatever we ask.
Yes.
Um, all right, moving on to the next one, Charlotte.
Hey, let's see. All right, Dawn, what does our company do better than local competing companies?
So, um, first, being a little bit cocky here, I'd like to say everything. Um, but honestly, there are a lot of companies that do property management. There are even several companies that now do what I call asset management, which is the actual physical maintaining of the property. But I honestly don't think that there is a single company out there that does what we do with the same focus. So while their activities might be the same, they charge rent, they collect rent, they might do inspections, they write leases, all of those things that you see from a typical property management company. I find that we're a little bit different. So our focus being on building lifetime wealth and building generational wealth for our clients. And that's through educated and insightful real estate investment and creating really great positive environments for our tenants. So the great thing about managing A and B class properties is these are also potential owners. And we've actually had some clients that have come back and said, we want to use you for property management because we rented from you and we're military now, we're leaving, and we want to use you because you were so great. So I've had a few people that have come back, and Charlotte, you had some folks that the wife had come in to turn in her keys, and she was in Brick Hill way back when,
Yeah,
and had said, "Hey, we're building in Hammock Bay, and when we PCS out, we're
yes,
going to use you."
yes.
So I think that's wonderful. And then our underlying tenet of what we do is that Backstage Realty believes that healthy, safe housing is an important building block to creating better, stronger communities. We dedicate ourselves to this cause by providing quality housing, supporting philanthropic work, and being involved in the communities where we live and work to create positive growth and change. And I think that focus in itself holds a much higher standard than just collecting rent and maintaining a premises.
I agree. Thank you for that. So they also ask, what are we currently working on improving?
Everything all of the time. So, having been doing this for so long, when I started in the business, the property manager that I trained under actually typed his rental list. There was no MLS for rental properties. There were no photographers that did rental properties, no floor plans, no. So tenants had to go from property to property. Um, and so, from that to where we are is such a huge leap. And we're always looking for better ways. We're not stuck in our way. Charlotte and I spoke about this yesterday. The fact that, some people get a little upset because people that work for us, because we're continually improving our processes. And when we find a better way to do something that will provide a better client experience, we're going to move on that and make sure that we take care of that. Charlotte, why don't you tell them we've got two brand new initiatives, one that we just rolled out and one that we are in the process of rolling out. Why don't you tell them about those new initiatives and how they came about?
Yes, okay, so the first one is our landlord liability policy that protects our owners. This service tracks if the tenants have renters insurance. And if not, or if it's expired or lapsed. If not, it puts a policy in place to cover the landlord. Even if the tenant chooses not to cover their contents, the owner is protected with liability.
And
And
and why is that so important? Tell me a little bit about your experience with when you have an insurance claim and the tenant says, "Well, yeah, I've got insurance," and then that insurance turns out to not be valid.
yeah, so if they don't have any insurance, they are liable for any damages that they've made to the owner's property. Such as, I had one recently that, the sliding glass door, busted. And tenants said they had renter's insurance to cover it, but they did not. And they had to come out of pocket for about $1,200. And
Now to be clear, when you say busted, you don't mean it quit working. They broke the
no,
glass.
the glass cracked, yes. And, had they not been able to pay for that, that would have been on the owner. And so we like to have, something above just a renter's policy, because if they don't have it, then, and they can't pay for it, it goes back to the owner. So this is just another level to protect the owner on top of what an owner already has. An owner's renter's policy has liability, but this is an extra amount to cover them.
Yeah, because at like at Ortega, trial by fire,
Oh,
um,
yes.
they we took over a property, Charlotte. I took it over. I give Charlotte gifts all the time. And I had a realtor friend of mine call me up, and a friend of hers was very upset. They had rented themselves. They are military. They've rented to a military couple. And by the time they called me, it was so far gone. Do you want to tell that a little bit about that story and the
Yeah,
financial hardship that created for that family?
yeah, it was really, really a terrible situation. So by the time it got to the owner, it was because there had been a fire in the kitchen. The tenant left something on the stove, and the fire marshal had to go through the home and contacted the owner to say that they had pulled out, I don't know, chickens, ducks, 13 or 14 cats, dogs, and it was in a terrible shape. And then when we went in, there was feces on the floor, on the walls. It was in such bad condition. And this was a total redo, a remodel, and had to get the tenants to get out. And the owner was stuck because the tenants did not have renter's insurance at all.
And they hadn't used clear contractual language
No,
on several things that had happened. And so
yeah,
there was a lot of that money that they couldn't recoup.
right, yes,
Um, all right. So that's a bad tenant story. That wasn't our tenant. No realtor put that tenant in that property.
no.
It was a friend of a friend, and they trusted them. So tell me what's different. Tell me about renting a property. How do you advertise it? How do we get it ready? What are those goal timelines? Um,
So, marketing the property entails, several steps. The first step is meeting with an owner, looking at the property, and pointing out any issues that any repairs, anything to get a picture ready. Those things need to be done first. Once all of those are taken care of, we try to schedule some pictures within a couple of days. Get
and do
pictures
we shoot
back.
those with our iPhone? How do we?
Oh, no, we do professional pictures. Absolutely, at our cost. We pay for those. And once those are back, we put the property in the MLS, on our website, on Zillow, Realtor.com, etc. That list goes on and on. And we also send out, once we get prospects, we make videos of the property so that we can upload them on YouTube or on our website to have those available for people out of town.
And what a wonderful, we rent a lot sight unseen.
Yes, a lot of
So a lot of
transfers.
being such a big military community, a lot of times people don't have time to come for a house hunting trip.
Yes.
So having those videos, floor plans, any additional information, and then moving forward when we're advertising a property, I hear a lot of tenants complain that they rented a property. As a matter of fact, we've got some tenants right now that I love, and they said they had rented a property, but when they got to the property, the pictures had obviously been years old. The rooms had been painted different colors, there was different flooring, there was, how do we protect against that?
Well, every couple of years, once we try to start marketing a property, we go in and look at how long it's been since we've done new photos. And if it's been a while, we go back in and do new photos, redo our marketing. Also, look at, the area and how we describe the property.
Right.
Just look at every detail so that, what we're marketing is true in fact, and the best descriptions.
And that saves a lot of heartache, because I know the couple that I'm talking about, they moved here, so that landlord thought they had rented the property, and then when they got here and they felt duped, and then they moved out, well, the landlord had lost marketing time, and
Yes,
all of that. So I think it's investment wise, it's the best use of our money to be able to
yes,
do that and make sure that the person is going to be happy with the property, and that they're seeing a true and correct picture
yeah,
of the condition of that property.
yes, yes,
All right. And we talked about this a little bit. So when a tenant gives notice, we've got a tenant, they're in a property, they've got orders, they're military, they've given us notice. When do you start marketing it? Walk me through that process. And how do we schedule an available date? Do we wait till they're out and then start marketing? How do we deal with that?
yeah. So, because we require at least 30-day notice, that gives us the opportunity at that 30 days. In some cases, it's more because if somebody knows, hey, I'm 45 days and hey, I know I'm moving. That gives us time. We start marketing right away. We get our date, get them to fill out their 30-day notice. And that gives us an end date. And that gives us a opportunity to start marketing right away. And again, we look at our descriptions in marketing and the pictures to make sure they're updated. Also, knowing that I've been in the property in the last 3 months, that it doesn't look like this. And so we take into consideration all of those factors before we put it on the market. But we start marketing as soon as possible. That way we can start scheduling prospects to come in and take a look at the property. We can do a new video, send that video out to out-of-towners. And then that in between, tenancy, at the end of their tenancy, I like to have at least 7 days in between. Because I need to go in and inspect the property. If there's any damages that need to be done, need to be repaired, that gives me time to get those scheduled. If it's not been cleaned, carpets need cleaning, anything that needs to be done for a new tenant, I like to give myself some time in there.
And that way, your new tenant going in, they're getting the best premium product, and they're happier when they arrive, because
Yes,
we can say, yes, it's clean, it's
yes,
ready, there aren't repair issues.
right.
So that helps improve that tenant experience.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
and I didn't talk, yeah, I go on to talk a little bit later about relationships, but that's all part of it, right? Like making sure that what you've shown them in the advertising is true and correct, making
Yes,
sure that when they move in, that you've got a clean, crisp move-in experience, that when they get there, the property is ready for them, they're not chasing bugs out, they're not
yes,
having to spend all day cleaning. They're not, the grass isn't knee high,
right.
that they feel like we are taking care of them. And that's that bud to building that relationship.
Yes, yes, and they're very appreciative, when they come into their home and they can settle and they can move in peace.
Yes.
And that's
And
appreciated.
I didn't put that in here. I'm surprised you didn't catch it, because you had written a note on there for me to mention that we also do tenant baskets.
Yes,
And I had, well, Charlotte has a client that actually was bragging about this other company that she had gone with. Now she left me. We left the door open. She thought there was something better on the other side of the fence. Within 6 months, she had been with 3 different companies. And then she reached out and decided to come back to us. Um, and is a wonderful, we've been managing for her for years now. And one of the things that she mentioned was this company, they played this good game and they do all these things and they do these tenant gift baskets. And I couldn't help but laugh because I've never used that as a marketing tool for owners before. But since that, now that we mention it, how many owners have responded well to the fact that we give gifts to our tenants? And then tell me a little bit about what we put in our gift baskets and why.
Yeah, so I actually recently had several new owners that we were onboarding, and I didn't mention the gift basket, and they came back to say, "Hey, can we leave a gift for our new tenants coming in?" And I was like, "Oh no, there's no need. We do gift baskets." And they were just like overjoyed that we were doing something to build that relationship. So yeah, the gift basket's beautiful. It's got some cleaning supplies, some snacks, some water, some toilet paper, some paper towels, just some things that, when you're moving and you're hustling and bustling, moving around, you may have packed all of this up somewhere and don't know where it's at. And it's just a few little tools to help you in that transition. And it's been very appreciated by tenants. They amaze me how many of them like will immediately text you to say, "Thank you so much for the basket. Thank you so much for the gift." Um, so
And we
it's a
cover that.
small,
We cover
yes.
the cost
Oh
of
yeah,
that. That's
that's
something
on
that
us.
we do.
Yes, yes,
um, which I think it's wonderful.
yes.
Um, so going backwards a little bit, let's talk about that multi-step screening process. And I know I'm going off script, probably driving you nuts. Uh, but let's talk about, so as we're going through this, a lot of things nowadays in this world are now contactless, right? So
Yes.
they may have never have seen the property, they might not be in the state, so we haven't had an opportunity to meet them. They get here, we have a contactless move-in program. So they can come any time of the day or night. They're not locked down to having to show up during office hours, and then we follow up with them. Um, so how do we make sure that these are the right people to put in these properties?
Well, like you said, we do have criteria that is posted on our website that we adhere to strictly. We do background checks, which is credit, sex offender list, um, and we have a
Criminal,
criminal, yes, the whole
Homeland
shebang.
Security.
Homeland, yes, absolutely. So we know a lot about them from that. But we want as much information as we can gather. So we do contact references, we do get landlord references back. If there's any question on those, we go in deeper. If there's any red flags, we, we, we take a look and we turn them down if it doesn't meet. We don't, now, if they're on the line, you know, everything looks good, but they're missing $10 to qualify. We're gonna go to our owner and say, "Hey, they look great on paper. Everything's checking out except for this one thing." But we stick to our criteria, and some people don't like that, but it's important. We want great tenants in these homes for our owners.
Absolutely. And so we've got a tenant and maybe everything looks good on paper, but maybe they're a slow pay, you know. What what do we do about that? You know, how do we communicate that with the tenant, and why is it so important to set those expectations?
Yeah, so, some tenants have been in a scenario where they've been with maybe an owner that is just, they communicate. And they don't mind if they're late on their rent. They pay them directly. But for us, it affects everybody going, from us to the owner. If they don't pay on time, the owner doesn't get paid on time. And if they're trying to pay their mortgage, they're late on their mortgage. It's very important that they stay within the guidelines. And if we see that, we've had some that we've had a conversation with, it's difficult. But we have to have those conversations with them to say, rent is due on the first. If you're past the fourth, you're gonna get late fees, and we are posting notice on you. And we will go through the steps to remove you from the property because this is affecting the owner now. And
Well, and it affects everybody, right?
it
So,
does, yeah,
you have to drive out, the property manager has to
yes,
go out to the house, they have to physically post a notice on the property.
yes.
And
Very
then
time
it
consuming,
stops up accounting. Accounting is wondering why we don't have money to pay vendors. The vendors are waiting on their money.
yes,
If there's any outstanding bills on the property, the
yeah,
owners are waiting on their money. So it literally affects the whole
yes,
vehicle.
yes.
Um, and talking about that, I know that was another one of the questions that he asked about rent and collections and all of that.
Mhm.
So our rent, all of our properties, no matter when they move in, we prorate the first month. Um, Rent is always due on the first. They
Yes.
have until the end of the fourth to pay. And when do we post notice?
We post notice on the sixth.
So, and what about somebody, they come and they say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to be able to pay." Do we wait to post that notice? They're like, "Oh, because things happen, right? Like, hey, I won't be able, my paycheck got messed up, or I just started a new job. They held an extra week. It's going to be next week or 10 days before I can get paid." I know a lot of companies would notate that and just keep trucking along and not post a notice unless they miss that date. How do we handle that in house?
Yeah, and we're understanding, we know things happen, and we accept your explanation. But we go ahead and post notice on the sixth. Because we need that notated in our system that we did post. And that we have that 3 days that we can begin the process. If we wait 10 more days for them to pay and they don't, and then we start the process, now we're 2 more weeks out. And
Right.
that process takes a minute, so it's best to go ahead and do it when it's supposed to be done. And have it notated in the system that it has been done, they've been notified. And then if we have to go further, we're ready to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we're ready to start, and we have those hard conversations, right?
Yes,
A
yes,
lot of times they don't even think about telling us, and then they get the notice and they're like, "Oh, I meant to call you. It's going to
yes,
be next week." And then they give us the reason why they're a little bit behind on it, and we have to tell them at that point, right? Like, "Okay,
yes,
well, tell me the day that you're going to be able to pay it." Because if not, that next day, that next business day, we're going to have to show up at the courthouse and
yes,
begin the eviction. And at that point, you're going to owe the rent, you're going to owe the late fees, you're going to owe the filing fees. Um, so there's a lot more invested in it at that point.
yes,
All right. And also, let's see, in that screening process, we look for a lot of things. They have to have a 600 credit score. They have to have 2.5 times the rent at least. Um, Everybody over 18 has to be screened so that they can go through the criminal, sex offender, national security um, check. And that's true even if they don't have a social security number. So we're one of the few companies in town that we work with a lot of military from other countries because of our ordnance disposal training center here at Eglin. And we do a lot of training. So I get a lot of military officers that are from that the embassies will send to us, or we've rented quite a bit to embassies directly. They don't have a social security number to provide to us, but they still have to clear and go through our background screening process.
Yes.
Um, and then we look for some things that catch our eye. We actually look at Charlotte and I went through somebody's balances and how much they owed versus what their limits were to make sure that they weren't on the precipice of making some bad financial decisions. We also look for collections on utilities because we have found over the years that if someone has been given a 3-day notice and they vacate during that 3-day period, most property managers and landlords won't go to the courthouse and file because you've already gotten the possession that you were seeking. But what the tenant doesn't do is they don't provide a forwarding address because they don't want the bill collectors to follow them. So you'll find electric, gas, cable are some common collections that we see on people that potentially may have skipped. Now, can we defer from our how set in stone um, our criteria? So we sign this criteria with our owner, right? They get to see the criteria, and if somebody is close, can we approve it?
No, we send it to the owner. They're the
So
only ones that can go above our criteria and say, oh, I'll give them a chance.
okay. See, and I think that gives owners a really good peace of mind that this is the lane. You're giving me approval to work within this lane. And if
Yes.
there's going to be anything that exceeds that or is outside of that, that we think may be a good consideration. Um, I had a military guy in one of your properties. We've talked about this quite a bit. That he was great. He had a good credit score. He had good references. He was had a good military job. Like everything on paper was perfect, but his house was in foreclosure, and it was a house locally. And we were like, this makes absolutely no sense. So we had him write a letter about what had happened. He didn't even know his house was in foreclosure. He was the VA borrower, so the loan was in his name, but the wife got the house in the divorce and she quit paying the mortgage. So we had him write the letter of reference. We sent it up to the owner, and he turned out to be a great tenant. The owner approved him, and he was in one of your rental properties in
Yeah,
Crestview for a couple of
yep,
years.
yep, certainly was.
Um, all right. So, another place that we have to build good relationships and to really shine to both our owners and our tenants is how we handle maintenance and repairs. And I know a little while ago when we were talking about the turnover process, you actually mentioned like having been inside a property. And
Yes.
so I know that that sounds like it's a very like obviously you've been inside the property, but a lot of companies don't ever step foot in their rental properties.
Yeah.
So tell me about maintenance and repairs, how it works on the preventative side, and then how it works with a tenant.
Yeah, so on the preventative, we do go in our properties, we do inspect them. And during that inspection, if we see things that, could potentially be a huge repair later, we take note of it then, and we put in a work order, to go ahead and get ahead of it. Maybe it's a small little spot of wood rot. Let's cut that off now. And before the whole piece is rotting.
Right.
That's just one small example. But yeah, we try to get ahead of things, on the preventative. Ages of systems, is another one. If I go into a property, even if, there's not a problem, the water heater is 20 years old. We might need to start looking at what it's gonna be to replace that, just to get ahead of when it's going to go kaput soon. So
Yes.
just things like that. And then on the tenant side, you did ask me that, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. On the tenant side, if the tenant, has something that, is an issue, something's not working, they have their portal, access through Appfolio. And they can put in a work order. That will come through to all of us. But we do have a maintenance coordinator and she takes a look at it. And if it's something, she's gonna troubleshoot first. There's a lot of things that we can troubleshoot and we never send a vendor out. And so, and we try to jump on those ASAP. That builds our relationship with those tenants because it makes them feel like, oh, you're listening, you're contacting me right away. You're taking care of my problem. And it's that helps with the relationship side. And of course, if we troubleshoot and it's nothing that we can solve on our own, then we're gonna send a vendor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. And it's also for the troubleshootings for the owner and for the tenant, right? Because
absolutely. We
there's
wanna
some things
say,
that the
yeah,
tenant's responsible for.
yes, yes. If we know it's, the water in the toilet won't stop running. Um, that can be an expensive vendor fix. Where that is a $10 part for the tenant. And that is tenant responsibility, and we let them know that. We're not going to, do things that are tenant responsibility and charge our owners. We're trying to save them as much as possible.
And then when we do these inspections, we're able to find all of the little nitpicky. We actually reach out to the tenants beforehand and
Yes,
say, what are all the things that are bugging you? What are all the things on your honeydew list?
yes,
Because we don't want to send a vendor out and incur $100 service charge fee
yes,
for a loose doorknob, right?
yeah,
But
yes,
if there's 5 or 6 things that we need to do at the property, we can incur that one service fee and have all of that taken care of if we know all of the things through our inspection process.
yes, yes. And it's very helpful. It's very helpful from the tenant, to take, make notes of those things because we don't live there, doing an inspection, I see a certain thing, but I don't see everything as if I lived there. So having someone that lives there, deals with things over and over, for them to be able to point those out, is a huge help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the vendors. Where do we get our vendors from? How do we vet them? And how
Yes,
do they stay on our list? So we were just going through this yesterday.
yes,
The three of us, Charlotte, myself, and Carmen, our maintenance coordinator, sat down. We were going over our entire vendor list, discussing which ones were good, which ones were bad. We were looking in the profiles and seeing which ones had survey responses. So even that, talk about the surveys.
um, for the vendors.
Yeah, so at the end of every work order,
Oh,
I guess
yeah.
I probably threw a little too much out there all at one time. So let's start with, where did we get the vendor from?
Yes, absolutely. So vendors come in all different directions. We've reached out to vendors that were referred to us. Some of the vendors that we've used for years and years were an owner's preferred vendor at one point. And we make sure that they are licensed and insured, and we request all of that paperwork before we ever put them in our program, and before we ever use them. So, and then every year we ask for updated versions of that paperwork to make sure that they are still licensed and insured. That's another level of protection for our owners for them to go into the property. And for tenants, we don't want anybody working on properties that aren't licensed and insured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it protects our tenants. We want to make sure.
Yes.
And then I love the surveys at the end. I wish our tenants would utilize it more, because that is one of the ways that I can bet, again, Charlotte, you and I aren't there 9 times out of 10 when the vendor is there doing the work. So we don't know if he came in looking, like he was high as a kite, or if he came in looking professional. We don't know
Right.
if he spoke well, or,
Yes.
was rude or was polite. And we actually call the tenants when a work order is done to make sure that the vendor actually completed the work, because heaven forbid, no vendor has ever claimed that they completed a job without actually doing it, right?
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, we do. We actually reach out to tenants. We call, text. Sometimes we'll ask for pictures. We want to see what the vendor did as well. It may have been, I thought it was clear what I wanted done, and they did it this way. Well, if I have a picture, I can say, nope, that's not what I wanted. I need you to go back.
Right.
We want everything completed to our satisfaction, to what we feel our owners would be satisfied with, and tenants. We want to make sure not just that the work was done, and the vendor was appropriate, but that the tenant satisfied with the level of work that they did.
Absolutely. And I think that also, again, that goes back to building relationships and making
Yes.
sure, that they feel heard.
Yes.
Um, and to me, that's so important. I keep coming back to that, because good tenants take care of properties.
Yes.
And when I have to approach a good tenant that I have a good relationship with, um, for example, I have a tenant in Destin right now. We had to make a $400 a month change in their leasing arrangements. And
Mm.
if we already had a bad relationship or a strained relationship, I have no doubt in my mind they would have moved out. If it were just about the asset, they would have moved out.
Yes.
However, I called them personally because I knew that for this family it was going to be a stretch. And they actually decided to stay. It actually surprised me, because I know that they had some reduction in income and some other things going on in the past 2 years. And so having to tell them this, and I don't know them personally, I don't know them outside of work. I don't make it a habit to make friends with my tenants. But I know enough about them to be able to relate to them. And I thought, gosh, I need to personally call them. This doesn't need to be an email or a text. This needs to be a phone call.
Yeah.
And they actually told me on the call that they really appreciated it. And they said, please just give us a little bit of time to think about it and rework our budget and see if we can swing it. And they came back a week later and said, yeah, go ahead and send us the lease. And they signed a year renewal.
Yeah.
And part of
And
that was they appreciate the fact that we take care of things. We do what we say we're going to do. Our
yeah.
standards are high for our owners. Our standards are high for our tenants, and our standards are extremely high in-house. And and we all fact check one another.
Yes. We should.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And we meet and talk all the time, every
Yes.
day. So even though we're all in different locations, we talk quite free. It's unusual for Charlotte and I, even though we manage different portfolios, not to speak in a day. As a matter of fact, I text her the other night. It was like 6 o'clock, and I text her. I'm like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Well, yeah. Why?" And I was like, "I didn't hear from you today. It was unusual." So, um, all right, really quick. Let's talk about when does the owner get paid? How often do we report? And what documentation do they get?
Yes, the owners get paid between the 10th and the 12th of the month. Um, and the reason for that is, we need to make sure that everything is complete. All payments went through, nothing got rejected, nothing got returned. And everything is, accounting is situated before we can, disperse payment. And then they get a monthly statement, goes out with their payment. And everything is in their own owner's portal. I can't stress enough how important that portal is. They can see everything in there. All of their finances, their statements, work orders, anything that we do say is in that portal for them.
So they get copies of the invoices from the actual
Yeah.
vendor showing what they did.
And yes,
And if they have any questions, we don't deter them from, they can pick up the phone and call the
yes,
vendor and
yes,
say, what do you mean by, this capacitor needed to be replaced? Or,
yes,
what does that do? So they can really do their due diligence behind us, right? If they
absolutely.
choose
Yeah,
to.
yes, absolutely. And contact us. That's what we're here for.
And anything that's big, if it's over $300, let's touch on that really briefly,
Okay,
because I think we're probably approaching our hour mark.
we are.
But over $300, who approves that?
That has come from owner. We will reach out, let them know all the details, the quote, and ask for approval before we move forward.
And there are some exceptions to that, right? Like we'll get three quotes if it's a roof or a water heater or something like that. But
Yes,
a lot of times maybe we looked in the system and say, uh, we found out that the dishwasher's not working. And we looked at the age of the asset, and the dishwasher is 12 years old. Are we going to send a repairman out, or are we just going to go ahead and have that conversation?
no, we're gonna have that conversation. We know from experience and from this happening, that that repair for that dishwasher will be more than a new one. So that's, that we need to just go straight to the owner and say, hey, dishwasher is gonna be anywhere from 350 to 450. We need to replace it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's just one of the ways that we try to use common sense to
yes,
make sure to save the owners money, because
yes,
we know from experience what
yes,
that vendor is going to say when they get out there.
yes, absolutely. Um, can I ask you a couple questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do we have time to tell them a little bit about licensing, insurance, um, controls, financial and procedural?
Absolutely. And I think that's actually really important.
Yes.
I have now seen in the past 20 years, I've seen three companies go belly up and take all of the client funds with them. As a member of leadership of our local association, I've been called in to help remedy several issues where companies went under and the money was gone. So I find it very important. I have been through a Florida Real Estate Commission audit of our books where they actually come in and make sure that your trust accounts, so that's the money that you typically don't see. Those are going to be security deposits and things like that. And they don't do that frequently, but when they're in the area, they'll pick a few different companies. I was showing Charlotte the other day that anybody could walk into our office at any time and say, I want to see when was the last time you balanced your books. We're pretty much completely a digital office because we are in multiple locations. However, old school, I still print out a copy, I physically sign it, I punch it, and I put it in a 3-ring binder, and it's on my shelf. So if the Florida Real Estate Commission were to walk in and say, I want to see where you balanced your books, I can physically hand them a folder, and it has all of the accounting for all of the money that the owners don't see, that they never think about. Um, and then also making sure that we have all the proper insurance. So we have all of the liability insurance, we carry workman's comp insurance, we carry errors and emissions insurance, we carry insurance on our buildings. All of that is to make sure that we're financially stable so that there's never any issues there. And part of that, we have an insurance audit that we go through every year, going back to our vendors, My insurance rates are based on me performing certain tasks, such as providing for them. I go through an insurance audit every year to keep my A rating. That says that anybody that I've paid more than $600, I have a current license and current insurance on file for that person. And every 12 months, we go through all of that and pull all of that documentation.
Yeah, that's
Um,
important.
yeah, and we also go above and beyond with our programs, our accreditation. We're constantly learning. We're members of the National Association of Realtors, the Florida Association of Realtors, where I'm a board of director member, the Emerald Coast Association of Realtors, the National Association of Property Managers, and also I'm working on my Institute of Real Estate Management Certified Property Management designation. There's about 125,000 known property managers in the United States, just in the United States. There's only about 8,600 people that have this designation in the world. It's timely. It's like post-secondary, education, post-secondary education.
Yeah.
It takes a couple of years to complete, and
Mm.
it's very, very in depth.
Yes. So what about organizations that govern this niche in real estate, and how does Backstage Realty fit into that?
So again, some other groups that I'm a part of. I've been in leadership positions. I'm the past treasurer for the Emerald Coast Association of Realtors. I served as treasurer last year, assistant treasurer the year before. I've spent 10 years on the board of directors with them. Out of the 10 years, I served as a board of director for Florida State for about 6 of those. I have served in multiple positions. This year, I'm the committee chair at our local level for property management. I also work for a group that teaches property management skills and best practices all across the United States. It's a company called IMN, and they teach not only property management professionals, but also investors, people that own single family, multifamily, and large multifamily. We only deal in single family and small multifamily townhomes, individual condos, duplexes, things like that. We don't deal with a lot of like on-site management of big multi-unit complexes,
Yes.
which is a little bit different. But I do teach best practices for the IMN group, and teach all over the country.
Nice. Very impressive.
So we have a bunch of other materials. We share everything. We're very transparent. Our lease agreements, our property management agreements, any addendums, anything like that. So we'll be sure to get that out to our clients and anybody that wants to take a look at that, and is thinking about investing in real estate. We'd be glad to pass that along. And any closing comments, Charlotte?
None that I can think of. Just appreciate the time, and appreciate the questionnaire that prompted this. This is well needed.
And I think it was really well worded and very in depth, and really made us think.
Yep, absolutely.
So awesome. Well, thank you, Charlotte. I appreciate you hopping on with me.
Yes.
And I hope that if anyone has any questions, they can reach out to us. You can go to our website. We have 2 websites. We have a sales website at backstagerealty.com. We have a rental website at rentwithbsr.com. Or you can give us a call 850-729-0399. Our owners actually get our direct lines so that they can contact us during non-business hours if necessary. And we'd love to do business with you.
Thank you,
All right.
Dawn.